And joining us in studio is political analyst Fiso Mahlango. Cecilia Russell is a special projects editor for ANN7. Mosiri Tsiane is the South African Liberty Foundation chairperson. Thanks so much for your time. And you at home, the lines are always open on 011-542-2186 or at ANN7 TV, and my personal handle at I am Cindy Mabi. To our guests, thanks so much for your time. And just your personal observations looking at the nature of what Afriforum is, and I'll quote or maybe use this as a preamble that Max Dupree, a respected journalist, wrote about Afriforum, saying that they trade in fear and based on ethnic mobilization, in that they preserve the privileges of white Afrikaners and in effect misrepresent the Africanism. So just looking at Gerrie Nel making this move, is it something that we can just take as a progression from his career as a public prosecutor?
Well, good evening, Madam Speaker, and good evening to our viewers at home. It would be very interesting to see how this plays out, because you see, they won't have a courtroom. He does come from a place, Mr. Gerrie Nel, where he was called the Mad Dog, because he was absolutely brilliant at getting convictions. He was a great state prosecutor, and he did consider for a long time leaving. I tread in fear to think he would join the Afriforum. Is this a rogue unit that has begun, or is this a parallel government? Are they going to have a disciplined style and go after people who they have problems with or they suspect for corruption? The issue also is that they do not have a courtroom. They cannot formally charge. So it means that if Mr. Nel will find the evidence that he needs with whoever, maybe he will target, Mr. Masondo, Mr. X, he'll conclude on the evidence, but he'll still have to present it to the state prosecutor, who will have to prosecute and perhaps satisfy him. So this is perhaps the rogue trinity. We do know that if Mr. Nel joins Afriforum, he's going to have very serious interaction with Paul O'Sullivan and McBride. Now that will make a threesome of very rogue units in this country. It's about to get very heated.
How does it take away from the credibility of this private investigative unit that will pursue cases that the National Prosecuting Authority hadn't? And if you look at it, it is targeted at what has been alleged, the ring fence around President Jacob Zuma and all his associates. Now, having said that, can we afford as a sovereign state to have a parallel investigative unit to what we have in the judicial system or criminal justice system for that matter? Cecilia.
I think that what is happening is very interesting. Private prosecutions are allowed in this country, I think, by law, though the NPA they would still have to go through the NPA, which is an important thing, because they won't just be able to take their cases straight to court. They would still have to lodge them with the NPA. They'd have to show that they have real reasons to show that they are that they have something to prosecute. But as Fiso pointed out, the thing about it is that the precursor to this unit, the only document it's produced so far, is the so-called Joining the Dots document, which was written by Paul O'Sullivan, and which seems to indicate that the sole purpose of their sole purpose is to go after President Zuma and his associates. And if you look at the conclusions of that document, it's the head of the NPA, it's the head of the police, the head of the Hawks. All of these very powerful people in our criminal justice system are considered to be part of where this document wants to take prosecution. So if Nel is involved and these are his targets, then the assurances that he gave that he's not politically aligned, that this organization is going to act without fear or favor, it's going to look at various cases that haven't been profiled by the NPA. is moot, because it's clear that that's where they're going to go. They're going to go after the president. They're going to go after the people who are associated with the president.
I should hasten to say that we did invite Afriforum, who are very accessible prior to, of course, this particular story. But nonetheless, we continue with our discussion. You at home are welcome to give us a call. Just in looking at the nature of it all, can we say that this is a tacit attempt at a coup d'etat, essentially a regime change? If you have read the Joining the Dots document, it does highlight those that are around Jacob Zuma. We know Paul O'Sullivan had vehemently said that his life mandate and duty is to see President Jacob Zuma go to jail if that is the last thing he does. So is this private investigative or unit going to essentially target that cohort of people based on political scores that they need to settle, in your view?
Yes, it's quite obvious that you could see the remnants of apartheid starting to live again in more ways than one. Surely in this regard, you could also note that this is a better pursuit in the so-called Afriforum sense, or in their mind that, they would not have a trust in the public prosecution to pursue what they want to pursue. So this is the better option that they could look forward for. So they've got their best trained mind in there, and they've got their Gerrie Nel, and yes, it's in a way a coup d'etat, one would say that. It's in a way to undermine a democratic elected government, and it's in its own nature, in its own way, to pursue the affordability granted by the Constitution in that. Private prosecution, make sure that you on your own are targeting the president of the country, and make sure that you challenge, as we could see in various cases or the various matters, that you would find that the current president is always challenged in court. Whatever decision that he would take, there's always something that Western Cape will come and say, no, that's you can't do, this you can do. So yes, you are seeing a new emergence of white supremacy that will use the Constitution, will use our law, and make sure that you undermine the democracy.
Yeah, but how should the judicial system be reacting to this? Because it does sound that they're treading on very dangerous ground. Number one, we don't know who the funders are. Secondly, the agenda seems to be a proxy for fighting for civil rights. And we know that Afriforum has got interest in mainly white Afrikaner privilege and entrenching their protection, I guess. I mean, you don't hear them talking about transformation with BEE, affirmative action, etc. But here they come now wanting to essentially save South Africa from corruption by going after these key individuals. Aren't we treading on dangerous ground? Can they go on with impunity in threatening the national security potentially, Sis?
Well, indeed they can, and I hope Cecilia will lead us further. Ms. Russell spent about 35 years studying Paul O'Sullivan, and so there's many details to that, and we keep peeling at this onion, and there's a lot of details. Many of those details are also very sketchy, but the reality of the matter is this is a parallel attempt. In fact, you're right, we do not know who the funders are. We don't have information on who they are targeting. But it is believed that, of course, they are targeting President Jacob Zuma. Now, if you're going to target President Jacob Zuma, they're going to start with what we call the security cluster. So it will be the Minister of Police, the Police Commissioner, the Minister of State Security, and, those people who are considered the friends of the president. And those people are going to be attacked. And, of course, they're going to find a body, a cupboard, and a corpse, and there's going to be a trail, and then they're going to attempt. And this is not a singular opportunity. Afriforum and Mr. Gerrie Nel is already attached or inclined to other organizations such as the Helen Suzman Foundation and Freedom Under Law. So this is now a cluster that's coming in as a government, if not a government in waiting, then a governing power to destabilize this current regime and form an entrance. And so you also remember that even from the days of apartheid, Mr. Gerrie Nel has served as a state prosecutor for 36 years. I mean, 36 years is a long time. He started serving when Mandela was still in prison. So all of the details, the documents he has, you know, the combat of the ANC taking charge in 1994, all of this he's seen in his work lifestyle. So if he's looking for something to take someone down, he has it on his hard drive. He has it, you know, somewhere in his mattress, somewhere within his books and documents. So it's going to make running a government of transformation and unity very difficult, because there's always someone who says, hey, I know what you did in 1989 and I can prove it. That was good when you had a state prosecutor, because the prosecution is supposed to protect and defend the citizens of this country. But when they work for a rogue unit, and one that perhaps is against government, then it begins to be very, very dangerous.
All right, just to tap into your experience and knowledge about Paul O'Sullivan, do you think the association of Paul O'Sullivan with this Afriforum investigative unit will discredit it even before it starts functioning?
You know, the thing about Paul O'Sullivan is, and the thing about Gerrie Nel is that they have a mixed legacy, both of them. You know, they have a kind of a mixed legacy. I mean, but Gerrie Nel has been a superb prosecutor, and if you started listening to their press conference at the start, their motivation seems very noble, to go after corruption, etc. With Paul O'Sullivan, he's always single-minded. There's never a day that he, you know, hasn't his heart and mind on one thing, and his heart and mind at the moment is on Zuma. It was on Celebi at one stage, it was on Agliotti at another stage, and he, you know, he is single-minded. So in his single-mindedness and his particular way of doing it, you have to wonder whether that is not a political, that is now not political, that this whole effort of his is politically driven.
Yeah, but I mean, they position themselves so well to say, you know, they are after corruption, and we always maintain that those that are guilty of any improper behavior needs to face the book. But in how it plays itself out, especially when we don't see a reaction from the NPA, this is treated almost as one of the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. Yeah, you know, you have the right of association, you have the right of freedom of speech, and yet there's a bigger agenda that could potentially threaten national state security. Are you of that view, Mosera?
Yes. It's becoming very clear. I think it's becoming very complex. One will say it's now in the open. Yeah, we can all see it, that there is a concerted effort from various sectors of what we can term civil society members, whose intention is really to undermine a democratic process, to topple it by any means necessary. And there is no doubt about what the intentions are. You know, for a person, as he's indicated, for a person that has been working for the state during the apartheid era, to suddenly move to or associate himself and join an organization whose sole trait, its sole purpose and sole mandate is to protect the interest of certain group. Surely there is a clear-cut story that here you're looking at one indication and one agenda, topple the government through the so-called the courts. That's the only purpose.
Let's see who their bid partners are. With Afriforum, there's the Solidariteit the union. There's also links with the Freedom Front Plus, etc. Cecilia, maybe you can give us a little bit more of a profile, whether we can really separate this or treat it in isolation to the political machinations that are going on.
I don't think you can separate it from the political machinations. You know, I think that it's a civil societies forum with a very definite mandate. It looks after a small group of Afrikaans people. Not all Afrikaans people associate with it. I think we should be really clear with that. That it doesn't have a broad spectrum support with all Afrikaans people. So it's clearly freedom. Freedom Front Plus, and etc. These form political civil society associations looking after minority interests. Looking after minority interests may or may not be a good or a bad thing. It depends what you do with them. If you're a small organization, you will want to look after your own space. You want to make sure that your kids can get jobs. You want to whatever. In our society, these organizations may be seen to be quite reactionary in that they wouldn't support, for example, broad-based black economic empowerment, etc. But they definitely have a political space. And this space is narrow, and it's confined to a minority of Afrikaans people.
Yeah, but maybe they should then contest the elections. I know they're not a political party, but they certainly behave as such in the sense of calling for regime change and now running a parallel judicial system. The courts are already fatigued with our democracy being tested on a day-to-day basis through the courts. There's also, with the current national government, that we tend to forget that there's 11 million people that voted in the local government elections for the very ANC. So to come now and purport as if this civic rights groups represent the majority of South Africans who are displeased with the ANC government, that in itself is disingenuous.
Also, but one should very well consider that people are very unhappy with the DA. Particular Afrikaans measurements are very, very unhappy with the Democratic Alliance. They did not hope for a colored woman to lead Cape Town. They did not hope for a black man to be the mayor of Joburg. It was not their intention for Pastor Maimane to be the leader of the official opposition. But the DA knew that it could not do it in the old style tact. So whilst they do feel that the DA has a place and they merged and grew as an opposition, they also felt that Afrikaans people needed something stronger. Whilst the DA portrays itself as a liberation movement of sort, or a movement of liberals of sort, some particularly within some sectors, some minorities of South Africa feel that this liberal stance of the DA does not work for us, because in the end it has overmerged with black people, and that was not their intention.
Yeah.
So cut out our land. We are Afrikaans after all. We don't want these measurements, and this is the sort of organization that allows us to exist. So the DA, according to them, is diluted. So this new approach to a movement using civil society and using the judiciary is just the sort of Vredebond that they needed. It's a reminder of the pre-democratic age, and we are seeing a resuscitation of that in this new movement.
Mind you, but the ANC is also not doing itself any favors with the problems that are there, that the leadership also admits to, factionalism, etc., not pulling the party line in terms of transformation for those that are in government. Do you think there's opportunists within the ANC itself, particularly in the judicial structures, if you will, that are also giving a further credence to this independent unit, supposed independent unit of Afriforum?
I am an idealist, I'm afraid. I still believe that our judiciary is sound. It's got enough checks and balances in it to make sure it is sound. I still also believe that our constitution is sound, and so constitutionally, and in terms of the separation of powers, in terms of all the checks and balances that we have in our society, I believe that even if this is an attempt at regime change, which I'm not, I think that there's definitely a motivation around it, etc. But even if this is an attempt at regime change through the courts or what have you, that there are enough checks and balances within our civil society and within our constitution and within our government to be able to hold this kind of movement rampant politicking or rampant, political agenda.
So it's not carte blanche or free reign that they'll necessarily have. They still, as you're saying, and that they would have to clear with the NPA, Hawks, etc., to pursue whichever cases.
And don't forget there are three levels of there's the lower courts, then there's the appeal court, then the constitutional court. There are so many, and we've seen it in so many cases where it has gone through several courts, and at the end you have a different view So there are many, many checks and balances that are in play. There are many robust minds that are in our society that are making sure that our society works in a credible and a way which moves.
Yeah, but Cecilia, as Fisa was saying earlier on, that Gerrie Nel would have at his disposal historical archives of things that had developed. Now, as a civilian, not as the public servant, would then be able to utilize this evidence in supporting for necessary prosecution. So isn't that a conflict of interest? Or what happens in this case where, let's say, an implicated person finds that they were prejudiced based on the fact that here's a guy who used to work for the state, has now gone independent and pursuing them? Maseri.
It's very true. You obviously would think that whoever is a prosecutor in whatever state, they are at all times a neutral people. They're pursuing whatever it seems to be in the just cause. Now, the ugly head that now rises shows you that your prosecutorial has had people who will align themselves to a specific race, for a specific group, with a specific agenda. Makes you wonder about other cases that he might have prosecuted, or different people of different race and with different religion, one would think. You know, to undermine this, as to think, in actual fact, it's painful. It's very painful to have had so much trust in a man whom you thought at all times was pursuing what was just, was pursuing a fight against criminality. Now you discover, and he paints it right in their heart when he takes you 30 years back in apartheid years. Now he joins a group that in any of its nature, in any way of its nature, its pursuit is only one thing: to protect an interest of certain individuals. And we cannot take it light. You can't just watch and say that whatever they would do will be in the best interest of South Africa. Surely it's in the best interest of a particular race. It's painful, you know, to look at it in that light, and to also, it brings back all our history back to today. You know, this association of a man that you saw all along, that, you know, South Africans had trust in him and saw him as a man who would pursue justice in all costs, particularly the Pistorius case. You know, you look at it and say, this is the man who will fight for justice. But to see that this justice that we thought he was fighting for, it makes you wonder about how the shape of South Africa really is.
Okay, Cecilia, are you of the same view that Gerrie Nel had dumped the state to pursue the interests of a right-wing movement?
I think that in a way, I don't. I think that he's definitely dubbed the state for a right-wing movement. There's no doubt about it. That's the way it is. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Whether he's going to use his knowledge, as Visa suggests, and whatever, to aid him with his prosecutions, I think that he will certainly use his experience to aid him with his prosecutions. He's a incredible prosecutor. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's not an amateur in any way. He's an incredible prosecutor, and aligned with O'Sullivan, who is an incredibly difficult person, but also had some success. Could be quite a devastating collection of people. Let's put it that way. But I think that what Marcel was saying, that he's, you know, that he's now showing his colours. I think that's an interesting observation. Have we all along had somebody who has had this leaning and is now saying, I'm not a politically affiliated, etc., now going to be in charge of this unit?
All right, just last word, Sfiso, I see you seem to disagree, not necessarily with the credentials of Gerrie Nel, that you can't wish away, but just in terms of where he finds himself in this space.
Well, actually, I was going to say that ABSA must pay back the money. But I do also think that when you deal with people who are particularly iconoclastic, you get that Gerrie Nel also sort of lost the Oscar Pistorius trial. He expected the sentence of 15 years and beyond, and Oscar was then charged with culpable homicide. And he didn't take that very lightly. So when you've prosecuted Oscar and you've prosecuted the then police commissioner, Mr. Jackie Selebe, and you've put Agliotti behind bars for the murder of Brett Kebbel, you've got a very significant profile in this country. And how do you then serve under this NPA for the rest of your life.
Okay.
So